He was the kind of man who commanded fear without raising his voice, and she was the kind of woman who was about to change everything. Cold Jay, surveyed his empire from the shadows of his corner booth. The Golden Phoenix wasn't just a restaurant. It was his kingdom. Every whispered conversation, every clinking glass, every breath taken in that space happened because he allowed it. His tailored suit fit like armor. His expression betrayed nothing, a carefully constructed wall of dangerous calm. He swirled expensive whiskey in his crystal glass, the amber liquid catching the dim light, the only movement he made. He'd turned away every distraction that came his way. Women who saw dollar signs in his eyes, enemies who saw opportunity in his territory. Love was a trap, a vulnerability he'd sliced away from his soul long ago. Welcome back, friends. This is Prince of Afro-Korean stories, where passion, danger, and impossible romance intersect. Please keep sharing your ideas for future episodes. And kindly like, share, and subscribe, and activate notifications so you never miss our latest content. Tonight he was closing a deal with a competitor, and the tension was thick enough to choke on, mixing with designer perfume and expensive cigars. He craved the quiet. The control. 6 blocks away, Maya was running for her life. The icy Seoul wind cut through her thin jacket, but the fear pumping through her veins was colder still. She gripped her broken bag strap, her lungs burning with each desperate breath. He'd tracked her down. The message on her phone had been crystal clear. Found you. Every stranger's face in the sparse midnight crowd could be one of his people. She was running on empty, hadn't had a real meal in 3 days, and her options had run dry. Her foot caught on uneven pavement, her knee slamming down, a sharp cry tearing from her throat. Through the pain, she spotted warm golden light spilling from a building ahead. The restaurant looked impossibly elegant, impossibly out of her league. They'd kick her out before she made it past the entrance, but it was shelter. It was a sliver of safety in a world that had turned entirely hostile. Have you ever had to choose between your dignity and staying alive? Maya understood she had no real choice left. She forced her exhausted body forward one final time toward those gleaming glass doors. Maya crashed through the entrance and reality tilted sideways. The rush of heated air hit her like a physical force. The aroma of sizzling meat, fragrant spices, and fresh bread invaded her senses and her hollow stomach twisted violently. She registered blurred chandeliers, gleaming marble, and the horrified pale faces of wealthy diners. They gawked, their expensive meals forgotten mid-bite. She opened her mouth to speak. Someone help. But only a weak gasp emerged. Her knees buckled, the world spinning wildly, and the final image burned into her mind before unconsciousness claimed her was the elaborate design of the marble floor rising up to meet her face. In the private corner booth, the negotiation was concluded. Papers were signed. Jay observed his competitor exit, his posture still rigid with alertness. That's when he caught the sound of labored breathing, followed by the dull thump of a body hitting his floor. His security detail tensed immediately, hands sliding toward concealed weapons, but Jay raised a single finger. Wait. He stood not with concern, but with icy irritation and interruption. He despised interruptions. He moved from the booth, his Italian leather shoes making no sound on the plush carpet. The entire restaurant had gone silent, and there collapsed on his pristine floor was the disruption. A young black woman, folded in on herself like discarded trash. Her jacket was paper thin, her sneakers worn through. She wasn't a patron. She wasn't a danger. She was nothing he'd ever permitted inside his controlled world. His guard stepped forward to remove her. Stop touching her. Jay's command was barely above a murmur, but it sliced through the silence like a blade. He crouched down, the movement stiff and unfamiliar. He anticipated feeling nothing, just the usual emptiness. But when he swept the tangled curls away from her face, his fingertips brushed against the freezing damp skin of her cheek. And for the first time in 12 years, Cold Jay experienced something beyond control. He felt the ice inside him fracture. Maya jerked awake, her pulse racing wildly. The ceiling above her wasn't the water-stained tiles of her cramped apartment. It was soaring, rich mahogany. The sheets wrapped around her were Egyptian cotton, impossibly luxurious. Terror, sharp and immediate, flooded her system. He'd captured her. He'd won. She bolted upright, ignoring the way the room spun dangerously. A man in an immaculate suit stood stationed by the door, his face blank. "Where am I?" she choked out, her voice rough. "Who the hell are you?" The man remained silent. The door swung open and Jay entered. He'd removed his suit jacket, his crisp white shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows, exposing intricate tattoos snaking up his forearms. He looked less like a restaurant owner and more like what he truly was, a man who controlled empires through fear. Maya pressed herself back against the headboard. "Please," she begged, her earlier courage dissolving. "I have nothing worth taking. I was just running. Just let me leave. Please." Jay stopped, his sharp gaze taking her in. The terror in her voice was genuine, but it wasn't the kind of fear he usually inspired. It wasn't fear of him. It was fear of something darker. This irritated him deeply. "I'm not holding you captive," he stated, his tone cutting. "You passed out in my establishment." It was disruptive. He gestured toward a tray on the bedside table. "My private physician examined you. You're dealing with severe exhaustion and starvation. Eat." Maya eyed the food, expensive soup, artisan bread with deep suspicion. "What's your price?" Jay's jaw locked tight. He'd rescued her. Carried her to his personal suite above the restaurant, and she was staring at him like he was the threat. He hated this sensation, this chaotic messy emotion she'd dragged into his space. He wanted the numbness back. "I want you out," he said flatly. "But I don't tolerate loose threads. Eat. Regain your strength. Then you'll explain who you are and why you brought danger to my establishment." Maya flinched at his coldness. He wasn't a hero. He was just another powerful man who viewed her as a complication to handle. "I'm not dangerous," she snapped back, her pride wounded. "You are," he countered, moving closer, "until I decide otherwise." The following morning, Maya felt considerably stronger. The rich broth had done wonders. She swung her legs off the massive bed, her thoughts clearing. She needed to escape immediately. She discovered Jay in an expansive living area, gazing out floor-to-ceiling windows at the glittering neon chaos of Seoul. He looked like a monument carved from stone and power. "I'm leaving now," she declared, forcing confidence into her voice. "Thanks for the meal." Jay turned, one eyebrow arching slightly. "No. You can't keep me prisoner." "I can," he said matter-of-factly. "And I will." "You're an unresolved issue, Maya. I don't know your identity, your crimes, or who's hunting you. Until I have answers, you're a risk." "That's your problem to solve, not mine," she said, striding toward the exit. He moved with shocking speed, his body blocking her path instantly. He was dangerously close. She could detect the subtle scent of his cologne and something sharper, like authority itself. "You made it my problem when you collapsed in my restaurant." At that moment, an older gentleman in a tailored suit, Mr. Choi, entered and bowed deeply. "Sir, we have a situation." "Speak," Jay ordered, his focus never wavering from Maya. "We've received intelligence that Kang Dae-sung's crew is searching the district. They're hunting for a foreign woman." The color drained completely from Maya's face. She stumbled backward, her hand flying to cover her mouth. Jay caught it all. The absolute raw terror. This wasn't some game she was playing. His entire presence shifted. The cold irritation evaporated, replaced by something dark and predatory. He looked at Mr. Choi. "Triple security at all entry points. Nobody gets into the Golden Phoenix without direct clearance from me. Find out precisely what Dae-sung wants with her." Mr. Choi bowed and disappeared. Jay turned his attention back to Maya. She was trembling uncontrollably. "Kang Dae-sung," he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. "You're not just in trouble. You're in his world." He loathed Dae-sung, a trafficker who specialized in the kind of filth Jay refused to touch, no matter the profit. Maya finally shattered. He posed as my scholarship sponsor. He funded my studies, but it was all fake. He tried to. He wants to. I ran. Jay studied her, the pieces falling into place with brutal clarity. She wasn't a risk. She was prey for his enemy. "You're staying," he said. And this time, his voice carried a different weight. It wasn't a command. It was a declaration of reality. "Not because I'm imprisoning you, but because if you step through that door, you'll be executed within the hour." He was now connected to her, not through choice, but through the unspoken laws of his dark empire. If this hooked you already, don't forget to subscribe, like, and drop a comment because what happens next will absolutely shatter your expectations. The following 3 days existed in a strange prison built from luxury. Maya was no longer physically restrained, but she was absolutely trapped. Jay's operatives were constant shadows beyond her door. The penthouse was massive, sterile, and frozen, just like the man who owned it. There were no family photos, no abandoned novels, no evidence of a life actually lived, only a life ruthlessly controlled. It felt hollow. On the 4th day, restless beyond endurance, she wandered into his private office. It was as impersonal as everything else, with one glaring exception. On the highest shelf, nearly concealed, sat a small ornate wooden box. It was crafted from deep mahogany inlaid with delicate jade. It was the single object in the entire penthouse that appeared touched by genuine human emotion, that appeared treasured. Her fingers reached toward the lid. "Don't." Jay's voice cracked like a whip. He filled the doorway, his expression darker than she'd witnessed before. This wasn't the cold irritation from earlier. This was volcanic fury barely contained. I'm sorry," she stammered, jerking her hand back. It's the only thing here that feels real." "It's not yours to touch," he bit out. "Who was she?" Maya asked, her voice suddenly gentle. "What?" "This box. It belonged to someone. Someone you loved deeply." She studied him. Truly studied him, seeing beyond the Mafia boss facade. "Someone destroyed you. Not like Dae-sung is destroying me. They hurt you so completely. You constructed this entire fortress. You're not actually cold, Jay. You're absolutely terrified." The silence that followed was suffocating. He crossed to the shelf, his hand trembling almost imperceptibly as he touched the box. "Her name was Minji," he said, his voice barely audible. "My younger sister." Maya's breath caught in her chest. "I was younger then, arrogant. building my reputation. An enemy believed he could manipulate me by targeting my weakness. He swallowed hard, his eyes fixed on the box. She was 16. They murdered her to send me a message, and I understood it perfectly. He finally met Maya's gaze, his eyes empty voids of grief. Love is ammunition, Maya. It's the bullet your enemy fires directly at your heart. I didn't simply reject it. I carved it completely out of myself. I will never hand anyone that ammunition again. Maya's heart broke for him. This was his truth laid bare. He wasn't a monster. He was a man gutted by loss. She moved closer, her fear of him completely gone, replaced by devastating understanding. So you've just been existing as a corpse ever since. His jaw clenched visibly. I'm alive. No, she whispered, her hand hovering near his arm. You're just existing. Jay remained motionless. Her words, you're just existing, suspended in the air between them, a devastating mirror reflecting the truth he'd lived for 12 years. He'd anticipated her fear of his confession or her offering meaningless sympathy. He never anticipated being truly seen. Maya didn't retreat. She held his gaze, her eyes filled with fierce understanding. I'm sorry about Minji, Jay, she said, her voice steady despite its softness. But you're giving them exactly what they wanted. You're letting them murder you too. Just more slowly. He turned away sharply, unable to bear the truth reflecting in her eyes. He returned to his window, his defensive wall. Later that evening, he found her in his massive, rarely used kitchen. She'd somehow persuaded Mr. Choi to bring her supplies. She was humming something low and soulful while stirring a large pot. The penthouse, typically sterile and lifeless, filled with rich warm aromas of spices he couldn't identify. What are you doing? He asked, his voice rough around the edges. Making jerk chicken and rice and peas, she answered without turning. And you're eating it. I'm exhausted by this sterile ghost existence. She glanced back over her shoulder, a small defiant smile playing on her lips. And I'm done with this silence. It screams too loud. He should have been furious. She was essentially his prisoner, a liability, a complication, and she'd taken over his kitchen like she owned it. But he found himself pulling out a bar stool, simply observing. He watched her movements, her complete focus, the way she tasted the sauce, and her entire face lit up with satisfaction. She radiated life. When she finished, she slid a bowl across the marble counter toward him. He stared at it suspiciously. It won't kill you, she teased gently. He lifted the spoon slowly. He took a cautious bite. It exploded across his senses, heat and spice and comfort all tangled together. It was the most genuinely real thing he'd tasted in years. A memory he didn't realize he still possessed, of his mother's cooking before everything shattered, flickered briefly in his mind. He searched for appropriate words. Good, she offered, her smile widening. It's good, he admitted quietly. He took another bite. She settled across from him with her own bowl, and they existed in a different kind of silence, not the cold barren emptiness of his life, but a warm shared stillness. She told him about Lagos, about the markets overflowing with color, about her dream of becoming a journalist. He simply listened. For the first time, he perceived her not as a problem requiring solution, but as Maya. And he realized, with a jolt of terror that shook him, that he hadn't felt this peaceful, this human, since the day he lost Minji. The peace lasted exactly 3 more days. It was fragile, dangerous peace. Jay found himself seeking her presence, sitting in the kitchen while she studied, the silence no longer suffocating. He even caught himself nearly smiling when she argued passionately with Mr. Choi about proper tea preparation. He was lowering his defenses, and a small terrified voice inside him was screaming warnings. The scream exploded into a roar on the 8th day. Mr. Choi entered the office, his expression grim, carrying a small unmarked package. It was delivered by anonymous courier, sir. No identifying information. Jay's blood turned to ice. He recognized that type of package. He opened it with deliberate slowness. Inside, nestled on black silk, lay a single delicate jade hairpin. It was identical to the one he'd given Minji, the one she wore the day they recovered her body. Beneath it, a handwritten note. I see you've acquired a new treasure. This one's even more exquisite than your last. I wonder if she'll shatter as easily. The words came from Daesung. The room collapsed around him. The oxygen was sucked from his lungs. The warmth he'd experienced. The shared meals. The sound of her humming. It all twisted into pure agonizing terror. She wasn't Maya. She was ammunition. She was the bullet. Daesung had seen it. He was already taking aim. Maya entered cheerfully. Jay, I was thinking maybe, get out. His voice was unrecognizable. A guttural snarl. Her smile died instantly. What? What happened? She spotted the package, the hairpin, the look on his face. She moved closer instinctively. Jay, I said get out. He swept his arm violently across the desk, sending the box, hairpin, and stacks of documents crashing to the floor. He whirled on her, his eyes wild with grief so profound it looked identical to hatred. This is because of you. You and your hope and warmth. You brought this hell here. Maya recoiled like she'd been struck, her heart stopping. I didn't, he knows, Jay roared, grabbing her arm roughly. His grip was iron. Daesung knows about you. He sent this message. He sees you as my vulnerability, exactly like he saw her. I'm not Minji, she cried out, pain shooting through her arm. You're absolutely right, he spat venomously, shoving her away. You're just the fool I allowed inside. I told you what love was. It's a weapon, and you just walked in here and handed it directly to my worst enemy. Tears poured down Maya's face. You think I'm a weapon after everything we... I thought you were finally living again. Living, he laughed, a harsh broken sound. I was suffocating on false hope. I was weak. I was a complete fool to feel anything for you. I was a fool to let you stay. Here. That was the killing blow. A fool to let you stay. He hadn't saved her. He'd simply been tolerating her. The connection, the warmth, the feeling of safety. All illusion. She wasn't a person to him. She was just a liability that became a weapon. You're right, she whispered, her voice completely dead. All fight drained. I'm just trouble. I'll remove myself from your perfect life. She turned and walked out, her heart shattered beyond recognition. Jay watched her leave, his chest physically aching. He wanted desperately to call her back, but Minji's ghost stood directly in front of him, and the fear was so cold, so absolute, it paralyzed him completely. He had chosen the ice, and he had never felt more dead than in that moment. She zipped her thin jacket, the same one she'd arrived in. It felt like a different lifetime. His words echoed endlessly. A fool to let you stay, and they burned hotter than any cold ever could. She'd been right from the start. She was just trouble, a complication. She'd been stupid to see anything more in him, to mistake his brief moment of humanity for something genuine and lasting. She'd rather face Daesung in the open streets than spend one more second where she was nothing but a ghost, a weapon, a liability to be managed. She wiped her tears roughly, her expression hardening into stone. She would walk through that door and she would never look back. Meanwhile, Jay stood frozen in his silent office, the jade hairpin cold in his palm. The penthouse had returned to its normal lifeless state. The scent of jerk chicken had faded completely, and the silence was absolutely deafening. He had won his battle. He had pushed her away successfully. He was safe again. Daesung had no leverage now. He had his ice fortress, his absolute control. So why did it feel exactly like burying Minji all over again? Maya's voice whispered through his mind. You're letting them murder you too. He stared at the hairpin. He had spent 12 years honoring Minji's death by constructing walls. He realized with sickening clarity that he should have been honoring her life by actually living. Daesung wasn't just trying to kill Maya. He was trying to prove to Jay that he was still dead inside. And Jay had just proven him absolutely right. Mr. Choi's voice crackled over the intercom, professional and clipped. Sir, the woman is in the lobby. She's demanding exit. Your standing orders are detention. What are your instructions? Jay stared at the door separating them. He could give the command. Keep her imprisoned, safe and miserable until he eliminated Daesung. Or he could release her to certain death. He clenched his fist around the hairpin. There was a third option, the one that terrified him most. Pull everyone back, Jay said, his voice raw. Sir, pull them back from the entrance. Let her go. Sir, Daesung's operatives are, I know exactly what they are, Jay cut him off sharply. He grabbed his keys, his coat. She's not leaving alone. He was done hiding. He was done existing as a ghost. He was choosing. He was choosing her, choosing life. Maya stood before the massive glass doors of the Golden Phoenix, her hand on the cold steel handle. The two guards blocking her path didn't budge, their faces carved from stone. He said to release me, she said, her voice shaking with fury and fear combined. Our orders are your protection, ma'am, one stated flatly. Protection or imprisonment, she shot back bitterly. They're identical. The elevator behind them chimed. The guard straightened immediately. Jay strode out, his long black coat flowing behind him. He didn't acknowledge his men. His eyes locked only on her. Maya's heart pounded traitorously. She hated him for making her feel this pull. Even now, after everything. I'm leaving, Jay. He stopped 5 feet away, a visible painful gap. I know. Move your people out of my way. They're not blocking you. They're blocking him. He took one step closer. He looked raw, stripped bare, his mask of control completely obliterated. You were right about absolutely everything. I've been a corpse walking. I've been letting Daesung win for 12 years. I've been letting him murder me just more slowly. I can't be your salvation, Jay, she whispered, tears threatening again. I'm not her. No, he said, his voice thick with emotion. You're not. She was my past. He took the final step, closing the distance completely. You're the first thing that's felt like a future. The world tilted dangerously. The emotion, the terror of Daesung, the whiplash of Jay's cruelty followed by his confession. Everything crashed into her simultaneously. She swayed dangerously, her knees giving out, a gasp escaping as the room blurred at the edges. It was happening again, the collapse. But this time, she never touched the floor. Jay lunged forward, catching her completely in his arms, pulling her tight against his chest. His heart hammered against hers, desperate and frantic. He didn't lift her like a patient needing care. He held her like she was his anchor to the world. He buried his face in her hair, breathing her in like oxygen. "I won't let you fall," he whispered, his voice cracking with emotion. "Not again, not ever again." She gripped him, her fists clutching the fabric of his coat. You pushed me away so viciously." "I was terrified," he admitted, his arms tightening protectively. "I was a fool, not for letting you stay. I was a fool for almost letting you go. You're not my weakness, Maya. You're my strength." And Daesung is about to discover what happens when someone touches what belongs to me. He pulled back just enough to look directly into her eyes. His eyes, no longer cold and empty, burned with a fire that stole her breath. He lowered his head and kissed her. It wasn't gentle or careful. It was 12 years of grief, a lifetime of loneliness, and a raw, desperate promise all colliding together. It was the complete opposite of cold. It was wildfire. When he finally broke the kiss, he pressed his forehead against hers, both of them breathing hard. The fortress was demolished. The man was here, present and alive. Love, Maya realized in that moment, wasn't about discovering a safe harbor. It was about finding someone willing to face the storm alongside you. We all construct walls to protect ourselves from pain. Do you believe true love is worth the risk of demolishing them completely? Jay didn't release her. He simply held her safe in his arms in the middle of his restaurant empire. And for the first time in his entire life, Cold Jay was truly, fully, completely alive. We've reached the conclusion of our compelling African-Korean story. If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible true stories that prove love can heal the deepest wounds. Share this with someone who needs to believe in second chances. Your support means everything to me. Comment below and tell us what part of this story touched your heart the most.